Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a book review from the classic original 62 book series. And it's book number 11, The Haunted Mask. I recently picked up a hardcover from the classic Goosebumps era. I just wanted a hardcover to read because I plan on reading this story quite often, throughout the next, foreseeable future. As long as I'm still loving Goosebumps, I just wanted a hardcover of this, so I picked this up. And it's truly a masterpiece in the series. This book is timeless. And when I mean timeless, I truly think that this story will transcend all of the other books within 50 to 60 years. When people reminisce and look back on this series, this will be the poster book for the entire series. It's memorable. It's universally relatable with the premise, the main character, just everything. There's such a perfect storm about this story with originality, original concepts and premise, to how the story unfolds, how the character matures in the story, how they grow and evolve. I mean, it's just one of those books that is part of the reason why I think that Goosebumps has very high potential to make great stories. And when people say that Goosebumps books are bad books, I always tell them, have you ever read The Haunted Mask? Because this is genuinely great, especially for kids' horror. I mean, The Haunted Mask, it isn't the biggest franchise in the Goosebumps, universe. It only has 4 books. But I dare say that this first book is better than any Slappy book, any Deep Trouble book. I'm just going to say that. And I mean that. I just think that this book is just untouchable in many areas with many Goosebumps books. This is definitely one of my top 3 favorite books of all time. It's in my holy trinity. So, yeah, off the bat, if you have not read The Haunted Mask, you need to read this story. It is fantastic. So let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So the story is actually told in the third person. This is one of the very few Goosebumps books that is told in the third person. Most people are probably used to reading stories told in the first person, but this is one where it's told in the third person. Kind of like how Welcome to Dead House and Stay Out of the Basement, books like that were done. This is one of those stories that did that as well. But besides that, let's get into the plot overview. So the main character is named Carly Beth. Now, to give you a little idea of what Carly Beth is like, she's like an 11-year-old girl. She's short, petite. She finds herself not the most appealing girl ever. She has a lot of insecurities about herself, which stem from physical features down to her, behavioral issues that she has, which her peers have labeled her a chicken. Like, she's just afraid of everything, and she's easy to scare. So Carly Beth becomes a target of sorts for many people that surround her on a day-to-day basis. Her little brother, these 2 boys that she goes to school with. Even her best friend picks on her. And she doesn't know why people like to, scare her all the time. She takes it kind of personally. She wants people to leave her alone in that regard, and she is running out of ideas to make that stop. And you'll get that sense throughout the story. But she does come up with the solutions. But that happens a little bit later in the story. But the story starts out with Carly Beth and her friend Sabrina are talking about what they want to be for Halloween. Sabrina reveals that she wants to be, Catwoman or something. And Carly Beth reveals that she hasn't really decided what she wants to be, but she wants to be scary. She wants to change it up. She doesn't want to be cute this Halloween. She doesn't want to be what everybody expects her to be. She wants to be scary, and she wants to stand out. But Sabrina tells her, you're not going to be scary. You're afraid of everything. And Carly Beth takes offense to that. And Carly Beth says, well, why do you think I'm scared of everything? And she goes, you just are, but that's not a problem. And Carly Beth says, well, I think it's a problem, And this kind of tells the reader, okay, so what are you going to do about it, Carly Beth? Well, unfortunately for Carly Beth, she has to go through a little bit of a turmoil before she comes to the conclusion she does. And off the bat, you get to meet these two boys named Chuck and Steve, who Chuck and Steve are described to be Carly Beth's friends in the book, but really they're more like bullies. But they could be friends in the sense like they just pick on her all the time, and maybe they're more like friendly bullies. It's a weird concept with these two characters, and you rarely see that in Goosebumps books where the bully of the story or the bullies of the story are actually more friends to the character. But in this situation, I would hardly consider Carly Beth to think that Chuck and Steve are her actual friends. But Chuck and Steve are two boys that love to pick on Carly Beth. And it all stems from childhood where they try to, dare some kids to go into a haunted house, and Carly Beth chickened out and ran away. And ever since then, they pick on her. Well, it's a few days before Halloween, right? And Halloween's basically the night where you can, play pranks on people and scare them and get away with it. And Chuck and Steve have, I'm pretty sure, something planned up their sleeve for Carly Beth. It's never actually, stated in the story, but I want to doubt it. But, to get in the Halloween spirit, they give Carly Beth a worm sandwich, which she eats because she didn't bring anything for lunch or didn't have lunch money. And she eats it and spits it out in front of everybody in the lunchroom, and they all point and laugh at her. And she gets publicly humiliated by this, and she runs home crying. When she gets home, she's not expecting her mom to be there, but her mom is there. And her mom, reveals to her that she made something for her and that she needs to come look at it. And when Carly Beth goes to look at what she made her, it freaks Carly Beth out because Carly Beth's mom had made her a plaster of Paris head, which is like a head sculpture, and it looks just like Carly Beth's face. And this creeps Carly Beth out, but she was already, humiliated today. She doesn't want to make a scene and, come off scared. She's trying to, get rid of that stigma before Halloween comes. But she still swears that the plaster of Paris had smiled at her. And it's a really creepy scene to imagine this, like just a statue of your head that looks just like you smiling at you. Every time I read that or watch that on the episode, it creeps me out. It's so bad. It creeps me out. But Carly Beth goes up to her room after her mom said that she has made a duck costume for her. And Carly Beth's, she doesn't want to be a duck for Halloween. She wants to be something scary. She needs to have something to scare Chuck and Steve. She's already had this in her mind that she wants to scare them, but she doesn't know how to do it yet. She goes upstairs, and she knows that someone's in her room, and she opens the door. This is where you meet Carly Beth's younger brother, Noah. And Noah is wearing her duck costume, making fun of her, saying, "Gotcha," scared ya, and calling her a scaredy cat. And he basically, Carly Beth says, "Well, take the duck costume off." He's like, "Well, I want to wear this for Halloween." She goes, "You know what? You just might get your wish because I'm not going to be the duck for Halloween." That's when Carly Beth pretty much makes up her mind. And she shuts the door and she gets on the phone with her friend Sabrina, who are, her and Sabrina start talking about the science fair project that's due tomorrow, the day before Halloween. And Carly Beth is talking to Sabrina and she goes, "You know what? I think I'm going to get a mask from the shop owner that just opened shop nearby our school. There seems to be some creepy masks in there. I'm going to get a mask and scare Chuck and Steve." So the next day comes along. It's a science fair day. And Carly Beth has this mission to go get the mask after school. But first she has to go to the science fair project. Assembly, like science fair thing. And her and Sabrina have, made like a ping pong ball solar system. And that's basically all they could muster with their creativity. But I'm not going to sit there and bash the creativity on their part because, when I was a kid, I pretty much did the same thing. So they turn that in, and other kids have turned in like volcanoes and like animal projects. And they're, Carly Beth feels insecure about her work, even though she worked really hard on it, she knows it's not as good as everybody else's project. And when her and Sabrina are about to get their project judged on, Carly Beth feels something crawl up her leg and bite her. And it turns out it was one of Steve's, science fair projects that got loose and the animal bit her on the leg. And she freaks out and knocks down her solar system and, basically destroys it. And she gets publicly humiliated again. Which this time she's like, you know what? I've had enough of this. She goes home and after she was done crying, she has to wait a few hours until her mom can come home because she has to stay after school to watch her brother Noah. And the shop that she wants to go get the mask from closes around 5 to 6. And around that time, she's, she barely has enough time, but she's going to try it anyway just to get the mask to make it in time for Halloween. So she goes to the store with the money she grabbed from her dresser. But lo and behold, the shop is closed. She's peering through the window. But then she sees a man crack open the door and says, "Can I help you?" And she goes, "Well, I'm trying to buy a mask for Halloween. Is it too late?" And he's like, "Yeah, we just closed." And she's like, "I'll be really quick. I really need to get a mask for Halloween." And, being a nice guy, he's like, "Okay, you can come inside and purchase a mask." So she goes inside to shop around the masks, but she's not seeing anything that she really wants. Nothing really sticks out to her that would really scare Chuck and Steve. So as the shop owner gets distracted on the phone, she's starting to run out of time that the shop owner gave her to look around, and she notices the store in the back, and she heads over there and she walks inside, and then she sees these amazing, scary-looking masks. One of them have like bugs coming out of its mouth. One of them looks like the skin is like rotting off, and then there's another mask that she notices that catches her eye. It's green, it has pointy teeth, orange, yellow eyes, pointy ears, and she's like, this mask would be great to scare Chuck and Steve with. So she wants to purchase that mask because she's like, okay, I got the money, I'm going to go get the mask and hand it to the guy. And the guy stops her and says, "What are you doing in here? These masks in this room are not for sale." And Carly Beth begs and pleads with the shop owner to let her buy it over and over just for him to turn the idea down. Until Carly Beth reveals her motives for getting the mask. She wants to not feel afraid anymore. She wants to wear a mask and scare the people that scare her. And this impresses the shop owner, and he kind of has this dilemma where if he wants to allow her to purchase it or not. But down to the 11th hour, he's trying to get her out of the store. He goes, "You know what? Fine. You can buy it." Right? So she takes it, she says thanks, and she leaves the store, and then he closes the door behind her. And she realizes that she has one of the creepiest masks. Feels like real skin. This is really going to scare Chuck and Steve. But first, she needs to test it out to make sure that it will really work on them. So she comes up with this plan to go home and try it on and scare her brother Noah, which he effectively does. And Noah is so marveled at how the mask looks and how it changes her voice when she wears it. And Carly Beth kind of plays a prank saying, "Hey, it's hard to get the mask off." And the way the book describes it, the first time she takes the mask off, it's like so stuck to your skin and it burns to take it off. Oh, it gets under my skin every time I read that part. It's really creepy. It's really creepy when it comes to the description of the mask and how it affects your skin. But Carly Beth manages to take it off and say, "You know what? It's just a mask. Don't be too afraid." And Noah's like, "Can I try it on later?" She goes, "Maybe, just maybe." But I don't think she really plans to honor that. So she's like, okay, it scared Noah. It's probably going to scare Chuck and Steve. So she gets, the rest of her ensemble together, and she heads downstairs to grab her plaster of Paris head that her mom made her because she wants to use it as part of her costume. That says, she's trying to make a statement saying, "I killed Carly Beth. The old Carly Beth is gone. This is Carly Beth now." Which is kind of a dual symbology going on in the story there. Clever R.L. Stine. But she puts the plaster of Paris head on a broomstick and puts like a red scarf to make it look like blood. And Carly Beth's mom wants to stop her because Carly Beth's mom thinks that she's still wearing the duck costume for Halloween, but she gets distracted by Carly Beth's dad on the phone as she peels off. And during this time, Carly Beth had put the mask on a second time on her way over to Sabrina's house to meet up with her and go trick-or-treating for a little bit before she runs off and scares Chuck and Steve. So she heads over to Sabrina's house, and she's scaring a couple kids along the way there, and she makes it to Sabrina herself, and Sabrina's terrified, and Carly Beth is like, oh wow, it scares even Sabrina. Okay, this could really work. And her and Sabrina head off to go trick-or-treating, and Carly Beth has some weird interactions with some kids at the houses that she's trick-or-treating at, with this weird voice she has. It sounds like pure evil. And, she's just being wickedly mean and out of character. And Sabrina tries to call her out on it, and she freaks out. And then Carly Beth decides to, go on a little goose chase to try to find Chuck and Steve. And after, a couple of mistaken identities, she eventually finds Chuck and Steve. And this is where she finally gets her revenge in the story. She scares Chuck and Steve with the plaster of Paris head, which very creepy still till to this day. When I read this, I get freaked out. She's trying to talk up how the masked Carly Beth killed the real Carly Beth, and this is her real head, and the head actually talks. It says, "Help me," and it's really freaky. There's something about that scene. I don't think it really ever makes sense in the grand scheme of the story, but I don't think it really matters because it's Halloween. It's supposed to be fun. But that scene really gets to me for some reason. Every time. And Chuck and Steve freak out and run off, and Carly Beth screams in victory, and she drops the plaster of Paris head and it rolls off nearby a tree in a bush, and she goes to celebrate. She needs to rejoin Sabrina so they can so she can tell her, it's look, I finally scared Chuck and Steve. So she makes her way back to Sabrina's house, and Carly Beth is really not that big into candy at all, but they have a bunch of candy to sort out, and they're looking for candy specifically that have been open, or stuff that was made cookies and perishables. It has to be sealed candy. They're not allowed to eat it goes into that description, which is I always found really cool because that's how my parents were when I trick-or-treated. No perishables. Even though my neighbors made cookies for us every other day of the year, but if it's on Halloween, you're not allowed to eat your neighbor's cookies. I don't know why that was the case, but yeah, I really identified with that parental rule there. I always get a kick out of that when I read it. But as we're sorting candy and stuff in their trick-or-treat bag, Carly Beth tries to take off the mask, and this is where she realizes that it's stuck. And she can't get it off, and she asks Sabrina for her help, and they're looking for a line to the mask, and there's no line in the neck of the mask. It's become part of Carly Beth's face, in her skin. It's no way it's coming off. Maybe the fire department can help, and Carly Beth freaks out. It's maybe we can cut it off with scissors, and Sabrina's don't do that. And Carly Beth realizes that something's really wrong with this mask. It feels like real skin at this point. It's stuck to her. Maybe the shop owner can help her. So she runs off, and she, encounters some kids, and she goes, I'm supposed to be me. I'm supposed to be me. This isn't supposed to be happening. And she runs to the party store where she bought the mask, and the shop owner is waiting for her. And basically, there's a bombshell that Carly Beth learns about the masks that she bought. And the bombshell is that these masks were made by the shop owner to be real faces. And these faces turned ugly over time, and they're basically possessed by some form of evil, essentially. Now, what these masks do is that they take over your face. They become your face. And he reveals to Carly Beth that, you've taken the mask off once, you put it on a second time, now it's your face. And Carly Beth freaks out, and she's basically destroyed that she can never get this mask off. Until the shop owner says, well, there might be a solution. It might work. Get the mask off the second time, but if you put it on a third time, it will never come off again. She goes, well, how can I get it off? And he's like, a symbol of love. And Carly Beth starts to ponder what that symbol of love is for her, and she realizes that it's the plaster Paris head that she left behind earlier while scaring Chuck and Steve. And when she realizes that, she tries to leave, but these other masks, that were, on the same shelf as the green mask she got for herself come to life, and they float and they chase her out of the shop, and she's running for dear life trying to escape these masks, and she eventually finds her plaster Paris head that she left behind the bush, and she puts it over her head, and she tells them, "Hey, I'm Carly Beth. I'm me. This is me, Carly Beth." And they all run off and scamper. And then she pulls the plaster Paris head off, and then she realizes that the mask is loose again, and she can pull it off. So she absolves the situation. So she thinks. So she picks up the head and the mask, and she heads home. Her mom's been worried sick about her. Carly Beth disappeared from Sabrina's house. Sabrina's been calling, trying to check up on her, but nobody's seen her. And then, Carly Beth's like, I'm just glad to be home. I'll tell you everything, what happened. And then there's a mega twist that happens that leaves the story on that note. And that's basically the Haunted Mask in a nutshell. And plus, the twist is very iconic and very memorable. So I don't want to spoil it. But that's essentially the Haunted Mask. The strengths off the bat on this book, I'm just going to be honest, I have no negatives with this book, so there's no real reason to bring up any negatives. I'm just going to give all the tremendous positives I have. The first positive is the character development of Carly Beth is phenomenal. I love how Carly Beth starts in one place and ends up in another, growing from those experiences she had to go through in her story. This is textbook characterization in Goosebumps of how it, I think, personally, how I want to see it done for each and every character. Each and every character doesn't have to fit a certain archetype or the same archetype, but I think there should be a formula where you follow one part of the story, go through experiences, and then you come out the other side, changed or punished or whatever the outcome of the story lends itself to be. But Carly Beth honestly has probably the most relatable setup to a character in Goosebumps history. She's just really likable. She's sympathetic. And part of the sympathy comes from the fact that she gets publicly humiliated, not like once, but twice, by these people who are her so-called friends. And all of her friends and her peers look down upon her, even her own little brother. They look down upon her because she's afraid of everything. And she has to shed this opinion people have about her. And she has to go to the extreme extent to, make herself invisible, if that makes any sense. She wants to make herself visible by making her real self invisible, which is a dual metaphor here. And it kind of plugs into when she puts on the mask and she, puts her plaster Paris head on the broomstick. It says, "Hey, look, the old Carly Beth is dead." She's making a statement there, but that's also there's dual symbology to that. It's part of her. It's part of her mask. Costume. It's part of what's gonna be able to scare Chuck and Steve, but at the same time, she feels empowered enough to say, "Hey, look, the old me is dead. This is the new me now." And this is where she really changes in the story. And you get to see that growth of Carly Beth throughout the whole story, which is pretty remarkable, especially given the constraints of this story being in third person. It's probably the best third person story ever told in Goosebumps. And there's not that many of them, but this is definitely the best one. It still manages to capture realistic things that most people would probably think of in Carly Beth's shoes. And I think every direction Carly Beth went in the story was perfectly executed. Another strength of this book is how intimate the story feels. It feels like Stein put a lot of his personal experiences into this, and it really shows. It's such a unique idea. And many franchises have tried to rip this off since R.L. Stein put this out. Kids Horror specifically, I've seen this a couple times where it's trying to where it was technically ripped off in a way. But this is just a really great idea. Really spooky, really eerie. There's some body horror elements. I'm not saying that the story focuses more on the body horror element to it, but it is there enough to really creep you out. The psychological effect of the mask itself, how it changes you, how it changes your voice, how it makes you act a certain way. These things are kind of touched upon in the book here. I don't think it's really explicitly said that Carly Beth is being forced to do anything by the mask, but she's kind of being urged to do things the mask wants her to do. It's kind of implied there, but it's really not explicitly said in the story. But I think that is there, that I think leads itself into sequel books after this. Some other books kind of clarify that a little bit better. But other than that, yeah, the setting on this story is great. It's not the most Halloween feeling story ever, but it's just enough for it to be believable. A lot of relatable things, like I said, with the trick or treat, counting the candy and checking to make sure you don't have anything like homemade in there. Very relatable, especially in my circumstance. I like that Carly Beth got to get her revenge before she got her punishment. Kind of. She didn't really get punished, but I like that she was able to scare Chuck and Steve and do what she set out to do before she had to go through, torture to try to find a way to get this off. And it was an emotional experience to go through what she was going through with her reading this, because it's almost straight up panic. And like, when I can say panic is in a Goosebumps book, like this is straight up panic. Especially after she scares Chuck and Steve and has that revelation about the mask isn't coming off. That's sheer panic. And this is one of the few times in Goosebumps where I think this beautifully comes off in the story. And I like the wrap up to the story, and how there's another symbology about her putting on the plaster of Paris head. Says, look, I'm happy to be me. This is me. I'm myself. I accept myself. And then the story wraps up. I like how Carly Beth came full circle with understanding who she really was. Not to mention the ending is very iconic as well. It's just a very memorable book all in all. The masks are creepy. The idea behind this, shop owner making these, skin-like masks is eerie. The body horror element, the setting, the relatability, everything is just a perfect storm. So really, I have no negatives about this book. I really do not. There's nothing wrong with this book. So when it comes from a 0 to 5 stars, I'm going to give this book a perfect 5 out of 5 all day long. It's one of the best Goosebumps books I've ever read. So yeah, that's basically my thoughts on the Goosebumps The Haunted Mask book. Let me know in the comment section if you have read this book before. Do you love this or do you hate this? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.